welcome everyone. This is lovely. I'm Kristen Grippo, Community Engagement Director for Berkshire Art Center. This is Citizens Hall, if you have or have not been here. It's a really neat place. We're currently in full swing of our second to last week of art camps. So you're sitting in one art camp. Everything was cleared out for this event. The other side is another camp, and honestly, before you leave, you should peek over there because there's like really wild things happening. And we have another camp, a puppet camp happening down in 2D, and there's a ceramics class even happening as we speak. So we are a very busy space. We're a nonprofit community school with locations in Stockbridge and Pittsfield. We opened our Pittsfield location 2 years ago. Our mission is to provide hands-on art experiences in the visual arts for all ages, incomes, and skill levels. We offer studio-based art programs in multiple disciplines year-round, and we're just so happy to be hosting this event tonight. I want to take a minute to thank the Mass Cultural Council, which also includes the Lenox and the Stockbridge Cultural Councils. Without their funding, we couldn't make this happen. And we're here because we're celebrating the Berkshire Artist Residency Program, which has been in existence since 2012. That seems like a very long time ago, and it sort of is. And our goal with this is to provide Berkshire County artists who may not be able to travel afar to have residencies and partnerships with these local historical sites close to home. So we've been lucky to partner with the Red Lion Inn, Chesterwood, and this year new Ventfort Hall in Lenox. And especially kind of neat is that Chesterwood has expanded to have 3 artists in residence, and thank you, Margaret, for being here today to represent them. Just a few housekeeping notes. The bathrooms are down the stairs and down the stairs to the right. We are having this recorded by CTSB, so we'll be able to post it up on our website. It's mostly going to be used internally. So I've asked the artists to just repeat the questions. We're going to have each artist share and then do a brief question and answer after each artist. And I think that's it. I'm just, like I said, pleased to be the host of this event. And I'd like to introduce our first artist, and then in between I'll share who's up next. Does anybody have any needs or questions or concerns? So thank you. Without further ado, Kara Smith is our Red Lion Inn resident. Kara is an artist and educator based here in Western Mass in Sheffield. Her paintings, prints, and mixed media work are driven by an interest in memory, visual storytelling, and modes of communication, with a graphic sensibility and love of found materials and relics. She received an MA in art education from Brooklyn College and a BFA from the Art Institute of Boston at Lesley University. She has been awarded residencies at Mass MoCA, Cassini House, Collage Institute, the Vermont Studio Center, Brooklyn Art Space, and Drop, Forge, and Tool. Kara is a teaching artist and program director at Community Access to the Arts, we know it as CATA, in Great Barrington, which nurtures and celebrates the creativity of people with disabilities through the arts. So I'm going to slip up there, and I'll let Kara take the stage. Hey, everyone. Thank you, Kim. So nice to be here with everybody tonight. So I just wanted to start by talking a little bit about me. As Kristen said, I live in Sheffield with my husband and daughter in a 200-year-old house, and but have lived, I grew up in Connecticut, but I've lived in Boston and London and San Diego and Los Angeles and Brooklyn before settling here in the Berkshires. I'm only mentioning that because all those places have, forged a little bit of something in me along the way and shaped my work as well. In addition to being an artist, I'm the program director at CATA, and so here's a picture of myself and a CATA artist and another program director. We're co-leading an exhibit. We're co-leading a tour of our exhibit at the Clark and an art making experience to 6th graders at Du Bois Middle School. So, to start, I just want to say thank you to the Berkshire Art Center, especially Kristen,
for supporting and coordinating all of this, and special thanks to the Red Lion Inn for welcoming me and giving me the space and time to create a new body of work. My work in general is really shaped by materials and history, and to start my experience at Red Lion, I spent a lot of time researching and sourcing images. So I went to the Stockbridge Library, the Museum and Archives, and poured through their scrapbooks that they have there. They have several that are dedicated to the history of the Red Lion. Joshua Hall, the assistant curator and genealogist, pulled out a lot of interesting artifacts for me and pointed me in some interesting directions. So here is an example of one of the scrapbooks. You know, they're in a box, you have to put on white gloves. It feels like a really special experience. And this is, an example of the pages, what they look like. They go from the late 1700s throughout the history of the inn, 250 years. I think we can go to the next one. On two of the pages, I just wanted to point out some interesting things I came across. Just like tucked in the corner of the page is Paul Revere's business card that was just found at the inn, and a 1,000 paper money note from 1781. So just like an example of the interesting things that are just in this scrapbook. So these are two letters by someone named Anna Bingham. I became really fascinated by Anna Bingham. She's the namesake of the Widow Bingham Tavern, which is at the Red Lion. A local historian, the late Miles Leon, wrote an in-depth piece that I found really fascinating, but there's a lot of other information along the way. So just to give a little glimpse into her life, Anna moved to Tyringen when she was a teenager, and when she was 20, she was found guilty of fornication when she became pregnant out of wedlock. She ended up marrying the presumed father of her son, but then divorced him a couple years later. She then married Silas Bingham, and then she and Silas moved to Stockbridge and purchased the lot that the Red Lion stands today. They opened Bingham's store initially and then added a tavern later on. But then just a couple years later, Silas died suddenly, and she found herself with her son Thomas, her younger sister Lydia, and then her new baby daughter Alexa, and this huge tavern. And also this is all happening during the Revolutionary War. So a lot happening. And after many appeals, she finally was provided a renewal of the innholder's license that they had as a couple. So she became the first innkeeper and subsequently the first businesswoman of Berkshire County. So this is just a letter from her. I really wanted to try to find an image of her, but at the time I couldn't find one yet. So we can go on. So also in the scrapbook are just a lot of really interesting things. Newspaper clippings, marking materials, postcards, directives to staff and guests, a ticket to Tanglewood from 1937. Up in the right-hand corner is a directive to service staff, telling them how much butter and sugar they can use. And I just love the language. It says butter can be served at all meals now, but please, but one piece and only one piece per meal per guest. And the bottom piece is a letter of complaint from a woman complaining about the cheap people coming to the bar and the scents that are coming from the bar. So as we know, the Red Lion is steeped in history. And it's the first time that I've spent so much time there. And I remember my first day walking around the halls and being completely lost. Because it feels like at the time when I first went there, there were endless hallways and staircases. And I really tried to marinate in the scents and the energies and the sounds of the space. The textures, the colors, the shapes, they all played a role in my experience and in my work. Some of the things that fascinated me about the Red Lion are the many staircases and hallways, but also the couches that line the hallways. And I spent a lot of time there in the evenings, and there's really endless couches. And as I would walk down, you can kind of see, as I would walk down to wash out my brushes, there was never anyone there. It's nighttime. And then one day, or one night at like 10 o'clock, there was a woman sitting on the couch, and it totally freaked me out. Okay, so just some more images from my time. As I got into the groove and kind of had my little path that I would get up to my room, I just started to document things that caught my attention along the way. I was fascinated by the carpet, like the endless, just this design of endless, shapes and rectangles. There's so many interesting things lining the hallways, mirrors and ephemera and artwork and just little trinkets. More from my route, going in and out. And there's my room. After a busy night working, the mixed media series I'm working on this summer includes painting and drawing, collage and image transfer techniques, and a whole variety of media. And I really need to spread things out to see how everything works together. The next 4 slides are works in progress that'll likely end up in my show, open September 7th. I really took all my research I did, my personal experiences, and really just tried to channel the energy that's in the bones of this building and then the soil of the space. In this piece, I'm playing around with that, an image transfer of that letter of complaint that I shared in an earlier slide, and the general layout of the Widow Begum's tavern bar. And in addition to everything I've mentioned, I really draw on my dreams and subconscious as source material, and I found myself really trying to work out compositional challenges and just trying to come up with ideas while I was sleeping. And so bloomers and cardinals started to pop into my dreams a lot, so they also popped into my work. So here's some bloomers from that general late 1700s, early 1800s. And here's a painting of one of the hallways, also using an image transfer. I'm using color and shape as a tool to really make it feel a little bit more ambiguous and disrupt a clear sense of space and time. And then this is my website if you want to see some of my earlier work, my Instagram handle, and I encourage you to follow the Red Lion and Berkshire Art Center if you're not already to get some more information about the upcoming show.
So I have a question about the archives. Is it, so you had to go to the Stockbridge Library for that, and is it specific to the Red Lion? And are those things accessible to the public?
They are, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'd never been there before. There is actually also a historian on site at the Red Lion that I spent some time with, and she has a lot of the archives as well, but they've been slowly moving them over to the museum and archives that's at the basement of the Stockbridge Library. And yeah, you can go there and just be in the museum as a guest, and you can also look to find more information, and they'll pull stuff out for you, and you let them know what you're looking for.
Have you had that experience before, or this experience before where you've been kind of drawing from historical source media that you're also able to be in? Like you're talking about it kind of coming into your dreams and stuff. Have you had that experience as well?
Can you try to repeat that?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
So she was asking if I've had this experience before where I'm drawing from historical materials and working on site. That's good. So, right, okay. No, actually, I do get a lot of source material and inspiration in a lot of different ways, but haven't been able to put those two together, so it's kind of a special circumstance.
I have one more question about, especially like These are they? I see that it's mixed media, so it's a photograph that you're painting and collaging on.
Yeah, so it's a photograph I took of the hallway, and then I printed it out and used an image transfer technique onto birch panel. And so it's really on the surface of the panel, but not collaged in the same way. And then I painted over it. You kind of like rub away a lot of it. You've ever done that before.
It's a mirror image of the photograph that's early in the slides.
Yes, exactly.
What do you use to transfer the...
For this, I just use matte medium.
Oh,
And you just really like rub it away eventually. Like you let it like kind of sit in for a little while and then you rub it away. It works really well, and it kind of gives it like it feels like you can feel that it's a little bit on the surface, but it feels like it's actually like seeped into the wood a bit.
very good.
You said you had an exhibition coming up that's going to be at the Red Lion Inn?
Yeah, September 7th from 3 to 5 is the reception. Yeah, I would love to be here.
Is it going to be in the hallways or there's a special room?
There's a room. It's I think they refer to it as the sunroom. I think if you're familiar with the space, it's closer to the pool entrance.
It's near the gift shop. It's just past the gift shop at the Red Lion, and we'll share all those dates at the end too.
Your color theme, you've been doing the work always this kind of color theme, or because of you stayed at the Red Lion, this kind of effects from the experience from the Red Lion?
They're not.
I like the colors too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, they're not colors that I wouldn't use, but I feel like I started to see a certain palette kind of emerging in my brain, and it was really in reflection, just kind of based on the colors I was seeing around me. And so I decided just to kind of put some parameters around that to help create some like a thread throughout all the work. But I generally work with colors that are similar to this.
Okay. Beautiful.
Thank you, Kara.
Thanks, everyone.
So next up we have Stacy Scibelli. I'm going to give a proper introduction. Stacy is an artist and designer originally from New York, currently associate professor of fashion design at Mass Art. Stacy has served as faculty for several academic institutions, including Rutgers, SUNY, and Parsons, the New School, and as a visiting artist at Olin College and RISD. She has worked extensively advising students along their creative pathway and has years of experience generating creativity and accessing the flow state. Stacy's experience with curricular development and program coordination, as well as having the honor of participating as an artist in residence at Mass MoCA, Otis College of Art in Los Angeles, and Boston Center for the Arts, and Intercultural Odysseys in Costa Rica, has generated a vested interest in communal art making and residency programming. She is a recipient of Mass MoCA Assets for Artists Grant, a Franklin Furnace Grant, and a project grant from Possible Futures in Atlanta, Georgia. Stacy has exhibited at Field Projects, Proof Gallery, Present Company, the Parlor Bushwick in Brooklyn, the Danforth Art Museum, and the Torrance Art Museum in Los Angeles, in addition to performing at Dixon Place, the Slipper Room, and various other venues. Stacy has participated as artist in residence at Arts, Letters, and Numbers, and is this year's resident at Ventfort Hall. So thank you, Stacy. We'll give her a warm welcome.
Thanks for coming, everybody. I have a lot of slides, but we can go kind of fast.
Okay.
I started with some slides that I started to make these pieces of work in about 2018. So this was a series of garments that are geometric pieces of fabric that have snaps around the perimeter so that the wearer can create a multitude of different shapes and sizes and types of garments, and they can also be shown on the wall, so like sort of formal art pieces. And I would bring these to various places so that other people can interact with them. The previous slide was at Maker Faire in San Francisco, and so these are all kinds of ages and different types of people trying these on and interpreting the pieces, kind of completing the sculpture for me. So the next few, I was experimenting with the different types of materials, so a lot of these are upcycled. The past ones were like curtains that I had upcycled. This one is turmeric and indigo on hemp and silk, so I was also playing around with natural materials, trying to kind of deconstruct a little bit of our consumer behavior through these garments and thinking about how to kind of represent the idea of consuming and wearing clothing. So I was doing some ice dyeing, playing with wall sculptures and the multiplicity of a functional thing and a formal object. So I just wanted to show you guys all this work a little bit to kind of present what I had been doing before the pandemic, or right up until the pandemic. These are just a couple more where I was doing a little bit more of surface manipulation. So a lot of this was upcycled materials that in order to reinterpret and make them feel holistic, I would marble them or dye them in different ways, usually using some sort of water process. So this was also some marbling. These will be on display in Boston if you happen to be there. I can give details to Kristen in a couple of weeks or something like that too. So they've been working around trying to get them, I really want these pieces like for people to interact with them, but that can also be sometimes challenging in the gallery setting. So we'll see how these do. This was at Santa Fe Art Institute. This was sort of the last moment that I was making these garments in like a real process really in it. And so that's when the pandemic happened. I was out in Santa Fe. I'd taken several trips out west and had been in California for a little while. So again, just kind of getting people to participate with them was super fun. Then I was, like I said, out west, and I came across these buildings in my travels called Earthships, and I started this roaming art and ecology residency called All Is Leaf. And if you could just hop on that website really quick. I had done a week-long program in an earthship with about, I think it was 5 or 7 artists in Taos, New Mexico, offering the opportunity for people to come, artists to come and work in a novel environment, just like this artist residency, and think about the environment that they were in. And the earthships really inspired me because they were this holistic, functional, yet beautiful sculptural object that was really changing how I thought about my own behavior. I think about consumer behavior a lot through my fashion work. I had 2 programs set up. The website is set to 2020 when everything shut down. So I had 2 programs set up, and artists signed up for a program in the Earthship again, which these are pictures from the Earthship, and also a geodesic dome in Mount Hood, Oregon, and both canceled, obviously, because they were supposed to happen in April. So this program is stopped, but I hope to reiterate it. You can go back to the slides now. I just wanted to show a little bit about that experience because that allowed me to get inside these buildings. The building that we stayed in was called the Phoenix. It's this huge building, and it's one of the most grand of the earthships. But all these earthship buildings, what they are these off-grid buildings that are built out of recycled materials such as bottles, cans, tires. So you can see this is all cans, and the foundation would be made of tires filled with earth. So they are also, they have a greenhouse along the front where you can grow plants that often produce food. There's shiitake logs, that's tobacco, tomatoes. The next slide has pineapples and bananas that are being grown in Taos, New Mexico year-round. I visited these earthships in Canada, and they also had a fig tree that I ate a fig off of in November. So this changed my life going into these buildings, and I was extremely inspired. These are the bottle walls. They act like stained glass, and the interior is letting light in. And I'm super excited and interested about this. And I've decided, you can go to the next slide, a couple more. These are interiors. They also can be used a little bit in structure. So I was inspired enough to go out, again, the next slide, to Taos and take the building course. It's a month-long Earthship Academy. So that was me pounding tires. And if you go back just one second, this is the flagstone floor that I laid myself, and very much like pattern making, really, even though the material was so different, I was finding these connections within the work. So you can go to the next one. This is a bottle wall that I helped build in New Mexico, and I think the next slide is me in Vermont. I found a woman building one in Vermont and forced my way into her house and into her life. And that was a wall that I built. That's my first bottle and can wall that she allowed me to build in her bathroom in her earthship. The tire wall I didn't build, but I was standing in front of it because it's awesome. And then I took some other natural building courses. This is me in a straw bale build in Montague, Massachusetts. Just interested in learning about all these alternative ways of creating buildings and having the agency to do it ourselves. You know, obviously none of these systems you can do all alone, but also there is the sense of like having some agency over the shape and the structure itself and these decisions of material that is impactful to our health. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of all this stuff, and I've just learned so much, and I've had to shift my process away from fashion towards building a house, and I am building a house in Wendell right now. I'll show some pictures of things in a few slides. I also learned about cob ovens, so not only are these about living structures, but also structures that can feed us. And again, you know, using all types of natural materials. So I took a pizza oven course in Massachusetts or upstate New York. Built this fireplace in my parents' yard to try and get a little bit of a handle on the materials on my own. That's not finished and it's not very pretty, but it was a good early go at it. Next slide. Recently took a course out in Pennsylvania that was a clay plaster course. This directly kind of correlates to the next stage of my project, and so it was important to learn this. I'll be going back for a finished plaster, and actually something that I learned I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation at this course is a workshop I'll be offering here at Citizens Hall a little bit later in the fall, so I'll talk about that in a few slides. This is the Photoshop rendering of the house. There is a structure there now, but I just sort of threw this together, try to wrap my head around what was happening. This has all happened in the past 3 weeks. I'd be happy to talk a little bit about materials and stuff if you have questions. It's not an earthship, but because of permits and different barriers financially, things like that, I'm not able to build an earthship in Massachusetts, but I am using all the sort of elements of the earthship, very heavy walls, thermal mass, which acts like a battery, so that this should be a very efficient home that uses very little electricity, very little, no fossil fuels, really. Passive solar design, so it's heated a lot by the sun and holding that heat from the sun. The next slide, I think, is me working on the foundation, waterproofing foundation. So like learning all these new materials. That is a concrete material. This is concrete here. But once the structure is set, we hope to do all the interiors with all natural plasters and things like that. This is just my mailbox that I built in a day with some cans, and those are just two tires and a set of cans or so. So again, just these little things I've been building. So this summer being in Ventfort, kind of coming full circle, it's been very interesting to think about space and think about the lack of technology that would have existed when this space was made, thinking about my own process of building this summer, using lasers and, CAD and, all these high-tech things, and none of that was part of the building at all. There's a lot of masons on site as well. I haven't been able to wrangle one of them, but they are historical masons doing really interesting work fixing the chimneys mostly right now, but kind of an interesting outlook. Because I'm so interested in the way light will interact in my home, I've been really looking a lot at the stained glass at Ventfort. I also have some slides of the stained glass at Earthship. So these are really like the gold standard that I'm going for. I've not done hardly any stained glass, but a lot of people at the Ventfort Hall and the organizations that the Berkshire Art Center has connected me, they've all left me all this amazing glass stuff. I don't know who left this stuff in Ventfort Hall, but there's machines and glass that people have been so generous about. I know there's people that I've been emailing, a couple people. I don't know who left what though. And so if anybody in this room is one of those people, thank you. Kind of learning this, and we'll have a couple of small stained glass pieces at the show for Ventfort. These are two pieces at Ventfort that I find to be inspiring. Those are butterfly wings in this crazy collage on your left, and then a chair. I'm not doing any weaving, but this just kind of made me think of lace and fabric and stuff like that, so I really liked that. In the next slide, I have some plant pieces. That's a ginkgo. There's just this huge ginkgo tree on the property at Ventfort, so I've been pressing some flowers, and I'm going to make some flower collages sort of along the lines of that butterfly piece, and I've been making a lot of sort of glass little sculpture things and playing around with cutting glass and things like that. So these are bottles that I've created for bottle walls, but hopefully I have some fun little leftover pieces from this process that I'm making sculptures and light fixtures for that show. And then lastly, this is what I was mentioning that I learned at the plaster course, is that you can make these incredible little balls that become like a marble, mud balls. It's only earth and water. It does have to be a certain part of the soil, like the subsoil, in order to make this work. But and it does have to have a certain amount of clay content. But this is a ball that I made from the Pennsylvania dirt or earth. And then the rest, not the pink ones, but the other ones are from my land, from Wendell, where my property is. And you get them really polished. These are still in process. The middle one is a Tadillac, which is a Moroccan lime plaster, but I will also have some of those that I've been making. These I made just recently. I had taken a Tadillac course at another earth building organization called Yes Tomorrow in Vermont, and that's where I learned Tadillac. And that will be part of my bathroom wall because it's waterproof, so you can get it wet. So sort of doing little samples of things that are going to be part of the build. It's been the strangest residency I've ever done. It was so generous of you to list all that stuff. I know that's my bio, but it's a bit of an old one. But this has been such an interesting residency for me because I'm sort of hopping back and forth from this creation of a space to, sort of sitting in a space that has been here for hundreds of years now, and thinking about the energies and the flow of, air even, just how the comfort of spaces are, the history of the people that have been in there and how they made it comfortable for them over all these different years, and how we do it now, and thinking about all these things in different materials. So as much as I haven't been in the space as much making as much art as I'd like to be making, all of the little things that I've been doing at Ventfort and being there have been informative, and I hope, and have been really kind of shifting a little bit of how I think about what my house will be like, in the inside. So that's been really interesting. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Take a minute to reset this. So I would like to know, so what do you imagine some of your final pieces at Ventfort will entail? Will they be more the mud ball thing, or will they be stained glass?
So I definitely want to make a bunch of mud balls. I have a bunch of mud balls, so I want to show them. And so some of the glass pieces I want to make and have been working on a little bit will interact with the mud balls. So they will be this sort of, sculpture object thing holding the mud balls. And then I will have some stained glass pieces, some small ones, and some of those floral collage things. I want to press those between glass. I'm just waiting for them to dry out a little bit more. And maybe some textile pieces informed by those, the leaf shapes. I've been thinking a lot of making something along those lines, so I think that might be part of it as well. Yeah, so some textile pieces and mud balls and glass pieces, yeah. Floral things.
What do you use as a binder for mud balls?
Water. It's water in our. I've blown my mind. It's actually a Japanese technique called Dorodango, which means mud dumpling. And my mud dumplings are not quite the Dorodango because I really haven't sifted and really done a lot. But the finer you can get the clay on the outside, you're getting those clay platelets to lay down and become this gloss by burnishing and polishing. And I can't, it's shifted everything I think about sculpture and the materials that we use to make art, and the things that we think we need, literally just went into the earth and at my land and took this stuff out. And my soil's pretty sandy, so I've been having a little bit of a hard time with it. It's a difficult thing, but I think if I dig in different areas, it's also about location and where you find the clay soil and things like that. But it's really opened my eyes up to a lot of different things, so crazy. The Tadillac has a lime to it though, so that's also a little bit different.
So the board, they originated to the Japanese. Is that true? I used to make those.
Yeah, I'm not sure about origination.
Well,
In my
little.
mind, I think this has been happening since humanity. Because when you have a ball, at the end of it, and then you can play with it. I think we should be learning this as children, first lesson, So I'm not sure the true origin of it, but I do know that yes, Dorodango is a Japanese technique that the ones I've seen online, I haven't looked at an actual Dorodango one. Like I said, I'm polishing them, but I think there's more to it. There's a cloth and all this stuff, but I haven't experienced had anybody teach me Dorodango. We just had clay balls and we're told to polish them. So
we used to have a game. We kind of drop each other's ball on top of other guys. And if it break, you lose.
Yeah.
But somehow just, I don't know, you kind of create your own technique to make it kind of harder.
Yeah.
But rule was like just the water and the dirt.
Yeah, they do break really easily. It's
Yeah.
interesting because they're like, they seem very durable, but they will turn to earth again, you know, really quickly.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was thinking about you as I've been making these lately. I was, yeah.
I was shocked.
That's great. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy. So next up, we're going to start with our first of three Chesterwood artists in residence. I'm happy to introduce Daibon. He's a visual artist who grew up in Tokyo. He holds a BFA in sculpture from Masashino Art University in Tokyo and has had numerous group and individual shows both in New York City, Hudson, and the Berkshires. Bon started working with his hands at a young age. He chose molding clay over toys, making drawings over reading books. In the 3rd grade, he saw his grandfather construct a beautiful bird cage from a single piece of bamboo using just a few simple hand tools. Witnessing this, Bon realized that anything is possible. Accordingly, Bon hesitates to limit what kind of art he does. His practice has included jewelry, scenic design, ceramics, figurative sculptures, abstract sculptures, video games, and photography. Since the summer of 2023, Bon has taken a new direction with his sculpture. Its previous straight lines and flat planes have given way to contoured forms that invite touch and personal engagement. He's excited to turn his hand to porcelain and rigid high-density foam in a project of rediscovering curve and contour. So I welcome Guy. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Guy. I'm originally from Tokyo and I live in Berkshire for last 31 years. And I like to talk about my sculptures. I've been making sculptures for a long time. And even I had a job, I always made it. Just that I have to do it. But last 10 years, somehow I discovered abstract sculpture or abstract art. All of a sudden, I was just playing with foam core with a knife and a straight edge and start using a hot glue and putting them together. And I started having a great time. And somehow, I don't have this idea what I'm gonna make it. I just sort of let it come out. The forms was maybe there must be some kind of reason to come out from myself. Then after I kind of finished the forms, I kind of start having a conversation with my forms and just discovering myself. Okay, this shape is my memory maybe when I was a little child, and the color is from that moment. So that's kind of surprising. All the surprising is kind of I enjoy it. So last thing is I'm enjoying the abstract art. Can you do the magic?
Guy, can you just speak a little bit louder,
Okay.
please?
So these are the last 10 years I've been doing it. Just this is about 4 feet by 4 feet, but made out of the high density foam board. I just cut them into those shapes. But before that, I make a little maquette because maquette doesn't take much time. So I don't have an agenda to put into what kind of shape I like to make. So just let it come out and make a finished little maquette. Then it takes 10, 15 minutes to each one. Then enlarge to that kind of size, then I start playing with the colors. Can you go back? Then here's finished with Venetian plaster mixed with pigments. So what's that? Okay, next. So last summer I have hundreds of like a maquette like this size out of the foam core board, a 1/4 inch thick foam core board in the boxes. But I want to kind of keep them more permanent material. So So I tried, or maybe the ceramic. I make a slab, and so I made a shape, exact shape, the same shape as the maquette. Then after fire, somehow, I guess temperature, this wasn't right material, just distorted my straight edge, straight lines. Then I start playing, okay, this didn't meant to use for my sculpture or more shapes. So I kind of start playing with the clay. And I kind of, memory just came back from my childhood. It felt so good, like naturally very kind to my hand. So I start playing with the shape, very organic shapes. So then start enjoying that more like a contour shape, like organic shape. Then, but I didn't want to play with all the textures and stuff. I kind of like to find the essence of the form, like what the essence, the form itself has some kind of meaning, or you feel comfortable, or peaceful, or calm you down. That kind of shape, I just start coming out from myself. And these are kind of egg shape, and this is kind of shell, cow shell, but also kind of representing a life and the body. Okay, let's go next one. And this is, before I go to the Chesterwood, this is the kind of shape I've been working. That's a kind of egg shape, but cup shape. So it shouldn't happen in a real lifetime, but I kind of like to have that shape, and I felt so good. And this is the limpet shell. I've been collecting a limpet shell from the beach like last 3 years. Every time I leave on vacation, I pick them up. And I love the idea of this, that volcano shape is one of the strongest kind of shape in the nature. It's very hard to squish them down, crush them down, but has this like breathing hole, something lives inside. That's kind of gives me another dimension, just not from the outside form. So I always like the limpet. This is the first piece I made at the Chester. It's starting kind of in more representational, like body, like, because my environment there is surrounded by this figurative sculptures. So that's kind of new things to make representational stuff there. And I saw this statue of Daniel he made of the Lincoln. So I kind of started thinking, well, maybe I can find some kind of common ground with the representational stuff, or much more like a minimal shape. So I'm kind of playing with that kind of shape. And tried many ways to create that shape. Technically end up making a mold for the slip casting, which is I never done it before, but the school kind of give me support and can make it happening. It's a bunch of stuff just came out. It's not really minimal shape, but so I wasn't thinking to make this kind of shape, but I just want to fight with my kind of desire, just let it come out. And that's before the Chesterwood, and this is what came from the Chesterwood. The same title. This one has a stand. It's called the Standing Moon. Okay, next one. That's the kind of minimalistic shape. It's kind of very peaceful shape I really like.
Anything else you want to share, Dai? Before we do questions, anything else?
No, question. Any questions?
Did you cast the concrete base for the last sculpture at the Chesterwood as well? Or?
It's very geometric shape.
Yeah.
So I like the combination, the organic shape and the geometric shape. It's almost like yin and yang.
Also the lightness and the weight of the base.
And combination kind of gives another story to it, just not just the organic shape itself. It's more interesting, and I like the combinations.
Could you say again what the material is?
This one, inside is a high density foam, and it's like a foam board. But you can cut like the both of it, I would say, but doesn't have a grain, so much more stable. You can coat it with plaster or epoxy or that kind of stuff. It stays in a good shape, stable shape.
Dai, what about the spirit of the place or the spirit of Daniel Chester French's moving you think, to create in this way?
That was interesting because I'm an artist, he was an artist, but his life is 99% of his work is commission.
Mhm.
He worked for something. He has an agenda, right? So I was kind of looking for, is there anything just that he did for himself? Just one piece, some nude sculptures. And he finished this piece when he was 80. When he started, he was like 30 years old. But it took him a long time to finish one piece.
The Lincoln?
No, the Andromeda.
Andromeda, right. That's what I thought.
So that was interesting. But my work is 99% just by myself. So it's a different kind of artist. And I thought he was a great technician and good artist. And I could see the changes, the little change from the maquette when he started to the finished product is totally different. Even the small detail, he started changing it to perfect. To the, I kind of respect, I have a respect to see that kind of changes. Maybe nobody noticed it, but just the little details. So that was a great experience, and I kind of found it.
Do you think you'll use slip casting in your future work? Stuff that you did here?
Finally, kind of I'm getting a knack of it to make my shapes after I made them all. But I haven't had a find it yet. Next week, we'll find out. Because I like the feel of the solid kind of forms. But before I hand build each pieces, then gouge out the inside hollow, and put them together, and the others, you fix the seals and fire them. But after that comes back from the firing, you could see the seals, all the little. Its clay wasn't the uniform even. So I could see the little texture, almost like a marble, and rippling effects. And I didn't like it. So I'm really kind of trying to get rid of those next one. And screws everything so much.
Thank you, Guy.
Thank you.
So our second Chesterwood, artist in residence at Strack, is a ceramic artist and designer based in Berkshire County. Nature has always had an importance in both his life and his art. As you'll see, growth and erosion, colors, forms, and patterns that are all found in the natural world are great influences in the work he makes. Working with his hands to directly inform, sculpt, build, and create his works gives him a physical connection to the natural material of clay and this world that it comes from. Through his work, he seeks to create an environment that welcomes viewers to immerse themselves in the beauty and peacefulness he feels within nature. So without further ado, Kyle, thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, you'll see a lot in this work, and a lot of the inspiration I had at Chesterwood is from the landscaping and the natural forms and colors and textures that are found there. So beginning my time at Chesterwood, I'd spent a lot of time just walking around and exploring, looking at the different ways the landscape was put together and looking at the different materials as well. A lot of the forms and colors I found, along with the textures in all sorts of different areas, really informed the different slab-built work that I started creating there. So both in the gardens and through the woods, looking at a lot of the rocks and plants and textures really helped influence where I was going to go with these clay-built vessels. So looking from my studio out onto this landscape, it's this nice wide open field. So I knew I wanted to go out there and kind of capture a snapshot of what I was looking at. So I would bring flat slabs of clay to a certain location throughout the grounds. And the first one here was this beautiful, wide, peaceful landscape. So I would take the slab of clay and directly press it right into the materials themselves right on that location. So here's that vessel in the greenware stage just put together, and you can see the different textures and also implied textures that I saw there all kind of morphing together. And I tried to add the different slabs together. Yeah, sure. I tried to add the different slabs together in the lip of the vessel, kind of reflect where exactly this piece was made. So looking at that kind of tree line and the way the hills were rolling is kind of how this top of the vessel was formed. Then thinking about the studio and the residence and how the architectural pieces of the walls and the grounds kind of all fit together informed some other pieces. So this piece is more straight walled, straight tops, and all of these slabs were either pressed right into the location or the texture right there on that one. Some pebbles and rocks were taken from that location and kind of pressed right into the slab itself to give a similar texture to the finish of the outside of the residence and the studio itself. So again, for the view from my studio, I look right out to Monument Mountain, and having that beautiful view every day inspired me to go to the mountain. Here's the view from the studio as well. So I brought some clay up to the top of the mountain one day to capture that kind of feeling and beauty I saw looking out to it every day. So up there at the top, I found a few different rocks with very distinct textures that kind of stood out to me. So I would take that slab of clay, press it into it using my hands or the rib there to smooth it out, and then kind of peel it away to get this exact, like I said, like a snapshot of that specific area. Again, here's another one with a very distinct kind of wave texture, and then with the textures and the colors from where I found these different rocks and wheat fields and things like that. So I took a lot of reference photos to then inform the colors that will be used for finishing and glazing of pieces. So here's the front and back of that vessel that was created, and again the lip was informed by kind of the view of the mountains and how they interact and interweave out the studio window. Here's an example of all the different slabs that I would roll out at the beginning of the day, let them set up, and then bring them out into the grounds, compress them into the whatever inspired me for that moment. So then that also led to the next slide where I would find very specific pieces and then you use that as a wall hanging piece. So this will not be turned into a vessel, but will be used as like a painting of sorts, and really get those deep textures and also the ground surrounding it, so you can see kind of how the pine needles themselves kind of are surrounding that rock there. Here's an example of a slab on the clay, or the slab of clay on the rock. There's a very large rock kind of leading down from the upper trail that I hiked a lot, so I felt like I really needed to capture that. And then these might be the final pieces of slab built that I used a lot of the, similar to a pressed flower, pressed leaf into a book, but I pressed them right into the slabs to get the textures of these leaves and these ferns. And the ferns are kind of surrounding the gardens and very prominent in the grounds, so I felt that needed to be one of these wall pieces as well. So here's an example of a few more pieces that are drying, that are now fired, and I'm just now starting to add the glazes and colors to really make those impressions stand out in each piece. So another body of work, I was looking at these three sculptures that are all part of a fountain in Washington, D.C. These three pieces are all named after different elements. So we have wind, sea, and sky. They were commissioned for a naval general, I believe, for a memorial for him. So I looked at these three figures kind of as a triptych, as a three-part series, and thought about the forms and the lines that were in them and how I could use the figure and the space around them and abstract it in a different way. So here are three plaster cast that will then be turned into the abstracted versions of them. So I wanted to use plaster as a material, mainly looking at all the different figures and maquettes that Daniel used in his work as well. So I started off by making sort of a mold with like a low density foam and carving out a void, and it has two parts, and then they get put together, cast in between them, and then these pieces come out. So one that I started that's in the Chesterwood studio now. This is kind of the roughed out stage, and then the next is how it was finished So taking a lot of time and looking at the lines and the contours of each sculpture and bringing them back into my own kind of abstracted way. So this is either side of that plaster sculpture, and they all three will go together kind of as a similar series to the three that are in the museum there.
Thanks, Kyle. Which one is this one? Do you know?
I do.
Is it
This
water
is
or air or
this
sky?
is the
For
water.
roof.
uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, in each of the figurative sculptures that are in the museum, I try to find distinct lines that are kind of flowing through each. So I found very straight and kind of S curves in the water, and the big swooping lines in the wind, and then in the sky a lot of rounded, the figures holding like an orb, and then also there's a lot of kind of spirals and swirls in the hair and in the clothing. So I try to take those different elements from the actual figures and then put them into these plaster carvings.
So the beginning part, you can get an impression from the pressing the clay on the rock or surface of something you got inspired. But the impression is a negative.
Right.
It's not the positive shape you saw or
Yeah.
you got impressed. Is there any different after you finish the piece?
Yeah.
Is it different impression after
Yeah.
you finish?
That's a great question. So you were saying that the impression is kind of the negative of the plant or rock that I'm pressing into.
Originally you got the inspiration.
Right. So it is a negative, and then it has a void in the slab itself. But the way I'm finishing it is putting a darker glaze or an underglaze into that void, and then adding a glaze on top. So then that will help it kind of realize itself and pop back out visually, even though it's not necessarily pushing out at you. But adding a darker green or a gray or whatever I pressed into to really reveal that texture after it's underglazed and then glazed will kind of show that what I saw in a way again. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That's certainly not happy to introduce Grigori Fateyev. He was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, where he studied theater set design at the State Institute of Theater, Music, and Cinematography. Fateyev's work centers on developing contextual and contemporary architectural solutions for cultural institutions, museums, artist studios, private art collections, and performance art centers. As a part of his practice, Fateyev collaborates with artists on a variety of site-specific art installations, sculptures, and exhibitions. So thank you, Grigori.
Thank you. So my name is Grigori Fateyev, and so I want to thank first the Berkshire Art Center for organizing the residence at Chesterwood and the Chesterwood staff, represented here by Margaret, who were just fantastically supportive for the entire 3 months, and enthusiastic, more than supportive, just like enthusiastic about it. Which I mean, can't walk from one place to another without them going, what you do? So no, it was very, and incredible enthusiasm of the staff, and also ability to go into archives. Which was kind of important part for me, because in my work I like to, well, as Kristen mentioned, I work a lot with artists and studios and art institutions to create the spaces for making and exhibiting art. But at the same time, in my private sort of work, more artistic work, I sort of like to work with the physical landscapes and cultural landscapes and how they tend to interact and where there result in gaps that could be occupied by some sort of intervention, what I call like environmental object. And in this particular case, I was really interested in the design of a studio itself, but also the design of the park. So diving into Chester French process and looking at several artifacts in the collection. One is the very early watercolor, which was done before the construction of studio started, that documented his vision for the garden outside of the studio. So the studio in this case is this rectangle over here, where is the famous piazza portico that faces the Monument Mountain. And the studio itself was placed on the foundation, partial remains of foundation of existing barn that was moved out of the way. It's also a kind of very specific moment in the landscape when the landscape starts to break. Its descent from the woods to this plain and then drastically drops, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet and continues to go down. So it's almost like he had the barn in the place where he wanted to be, so he kind of moved the barn out of the way and occupied that zone on the very crest of the landscape. And what was interesting to me about this watercolor, that it was work in progress, but it also was, and him working with existing landscape, but it also was kind of a first document of what he was thinking. So going back to that, as opposed to countless interpretations of what he was proposing, done by following landscape architects and designers, including his nephew, didn't have the same sort of purity. And so noticing the changes between what actually was built and what was originally envisioned was kind of an interesting aspect, because actually the composition got much longer in this direction and shortened in this direction. So yes, due to the site constraints, but also I think just him kind of continuing working on an idea that he was exploring. Another couple elements that I liked is particular views of the garden. So this is a pastel by one of his relatives. And what I liked about it is a kind of very orthogonal view at the garden, focusing on the pedestal on the other side of those two columns, which is kind of creates a focal point of the landscape outside of essentially the composition of the landscape. And you can see there's a little dot right there that actually is very conscious choice. That was before the garden existed. That was something that he brought in afterwards, thinking, it'll be a good place for bust. The idea of something out there in the woods was kind of fundamental to this whole notion. And then there's a legend, according to some letters that he wrote, that he actually built a model of the entire grounds. And in some way, it becomes sort of very, interestingly, I think it becomes very apparent that he actually modeled the space three-dimensionally. And so I was looking at some of his plaster models that he created with his sculptures and memorials. And yes, he was extremely adept, not only at just making the sculptural models, so figurative work, but also creating architectural spaces. So in the process of that research, what I started discovering, what sort of became very apparent to me, is the link between this design and contemporary design by Frank Lloyd Wright. In particular, several designs that we can point to, but this one in particular, which is the Martin House in Buffalo, one of the earliest designs, fully executed designs of Prairie Home by Frank Lloyd Wright. What's interesting about this is that they both, ideologically, they were on opposite ends of the cultural spectrum. The French was very much sort of conservative, neoclassicist, Beaux-Arts, trained in Beaux-Arts art, and Frank Lloyd Wright actually actively rejected that, following the Beaux-Arts, and actually rejected the scholarship to go to study in France. But this building was built and designed a few years before they'd been built in 1903, which is about the same time the studio was built. And Henry Bacon, the architect of the studio, is same age as Frank Lloyd Wright. And what I'm noticing about the studio, so this is the comparison of the diagram, with the gray underlayment in the drawing is the actual plan of the building, and overlay trace is kind of extruding the most important spaces and observing how those spaces interact with each other and what they do in kind of the greater composition of the building. Well, this is a trace diagram of the garden outside of the Chester French studio, and this black shape is the studio and the garden wall. The others are mostly meadows, and the rectangles delineated by other elements within the composition. And what you start noticing between the two is that insistence on kind of a shifting geometries, syncopated spaces, and open-endedness of the edges, or actually not just open-endedness, but kind of like an interesting contrast between the enclosing spaces and then leaving them open-ended. And what's really interesting about this thing too is if you're at the garden, the kind of prominent view that French was so interested in, which was the mountain, the Monument Mountain, is completely denied to anybody in the field, in this garden. The place from which he would have been looking at the Monument Mountain most prominently would be inside of a studio, which is lacking any windows or doors facing the view. So in some interesting way, he sort of delays your experience of the view as you sort of approach the composition from the north, and then kind of plays with your perception along this edge between the sort of darkness of the woods and the light of the meadow, and the edge of the sort of geological edge of drop off of the landscape. So based on these sort of notions, I started developing a series of drawings, combining, measuring his original drawing and comparing to the current conditions, and then studying them as both using the geometry of the garden and the studio and their layout as a kind of backbone for ink and watercolor drawings, where what I was trying to bring forward is the kind of a darkness of the woods that I think the entire composition is sort of playing against, and that's what I was sort of like almost like imagining the darkness being kind of like a river that sort of flows through the composition and eventually reaches the lawn. So that was followed by a series of plaster and clay models. And at the center of the model, so I kind of constructed three-dimensional models and also used them as a base for the allowing the ink and watercolor to kind of move through the composition kind of by virtue of things being recessed and pushed out, creating the emphasizing the circulation as the kind of path for the water to travel. And it's not quite clear here, but what this is the interior of the studio. So to juxtapose the composition of the garden, I want to sort of get away the kind of the trappings of the style, the delineate design of the building exterior, and focus on the actual interior that Church designed for himself to work in, which is kind of a pure like 30 by 30 box with a pyramidal shape roof. And so we did a couple of 3D prints of these interior spaces with the goal to kind of have them occupying the center of the plaster compositions. And then concurrently I was working on a series of watercolor and ink sketches of the garden, again kind of focusing on the undergrowth of the woods as contrasted with the sliding geometry of the garden. So that's kind of concluded one portion of my residency, and then if you can jump to the next point. So I want to sort of create, sort of summarize all that and create sort of reaction to the site, and also kind of observing the artists at work, in these rooms that they were given, that there was historic rooms and everything has to be protected and everything kind of have to be very sort of careful. And I thought, well, great for them to have space to like really unfold their wings and make as much mess as they possibly can. So I looked at a couple elements within the site. One obviously is the interior of the studio itself, and you can see not only that this very interesting shape, but also the way the construction method of the studio sort of resulted in a very distinctive pattern of the interior and a kind of grid of space and division of the walls that could be used in further designs. And then this is the replica of the studio, which was actually used as a garage. And I just love that sort of presence in the woods, bounded by outdoor terrace and kind of floating over the landscape. And then the third element is the courtyard, kind of functional courtyard outside of the main residence, where the libraries. I guess I was leading directly into kitchen, so that's where all the household stuff was happening. It's bounded by a 4-foot tall concrete wall where the marble is cast into the wall. So there's big slabs of marble just kind of like used as a formwork to create the wall. And the courtyard covered in gravel, and the minute I was there, was the building kind of overhanging it, and you can sort of go underneath the protected area, underneath the building. I just sort of like immediately visualize somebody, like we actually were told that we can use the courtyard for any kind of messy work, and it looked like a very comfortable space to be, to just if you need a plaster cast or carving something. So these kind of three elements I sort of wanted to group together into the project, and the idea started to emerge where if we can create some sort of common space and then organize a series of volumes mimicking the interior of the studio, the Chester French studio, around that outdoor space. That would be sort of common working space, and then each studio would be dedicated to a particular technique, ceramics, wood, metal, sculpture, paint, and printmaking. So this is early sketches where we have the volume based on the interior of the studio, and then those looking for a way of those volumes sort of interact around the courtyard. And the next key. So another question, of course, is the site. So how do you place something like that in the landscape? What I was interested in, and when you at the main patio in front of the studio and you're looking out on the Monument Mountain, there's a very sort of distinct edge on the far end of the meadow, very crisp, very bright, and then beyond that is a shadow on the growth of the forest on the other side. So I started playing with the idea of putting these objects, kind of ghostly shapes of this interior shapes of the building, floating in the landscape. And then I took a walk down there, and this rendering is actually kind of a landscape looking back at the Chesterwood studio. So that's being the studio over there in the main residence. And again, you kind of had that interesting edge of grass, that sort of a sexy view. So as I was drawing the landscape and studying the topography of the land, what I realized that the edge we perceive from the studio is actually right here. It's so when you're at the patio of the studio, you see this edge, and that edge is good, 60 feet closer to you than actual woods that's beyond that. So there's this kind of a stretch, and that's what accounts for such sharpness and distinction between the two, and the contrast. So it also allows to create an opportunity for a structure that could be submerged in relationship to the original studios, so that actually it's not in the view in the same plane or in the same kind of visual field. And you can control to what degree you can expose the new structures. So I placed the courtyard at level 20, 30 feet below the level of the studio. So it's completely submerged, and the studios actually are submerged as well. And so that's the section of it. So that's the courtyard level. This is the studios, and also in the conversations with the Chesterwood staff and the artists, and present and current and past artists. I thought to expand the program from just studios to also have like exhibit space and the performance space, because they quite often have a situation where they're performing outside and then all of a sudden it's pouring rain and then you can run somewhere, and actually it's happened, and they performed inside of the studio, and apparently it was like a wonderful experience because the shape is actually very conducive to good acoustics. So what you see beyond is the Performance Arts Center. Idea is that there's actually an existing road that leads to that area. There's a Meadowlark studio. So legend is that as soon as the studio was finished, the main studio, Chester French couldn't stand it because it was full of people and people bothered him. So he created a new studio and he called it Meadowlark, and it's down in just to the side of this drawing, kind of down this driveway. So, imagine driving down or walking down to the Meadowlark, but then also having access to this complex. And the idea was to use the 30 by 30, repeating the same volume of 30 by 30, but articulating it differently depending on the function within. So if it's, painting studios might have like a lot of northern light. The sculpture studios might have giant doors leading to the courtyard. The museum might have just a giant sort of all glass roof, etc., etc. So in this drawing, you can see that this axis line, it's directly in line with the studio, and then the whole composition sort of falls around it, around this courtyard that, in addition to the studios, has kind of like a area underneath, tucked under the ground, and it's provides utility services for the studios themselves. And then Performance Arts Center is the one that's slightly eccentric and up, and probably the one that's mostly is visible from the original studio. So the last set of drawings is the sketches that I'm sort of developing right now, based on all this research, and eventually these sketches will lead to the larger drawings to be done of the complex. But that's the view of the courtyard was, let's say, sculpture studio, where the sculptures rolled out into the yard and could be worked on. And then the 3 volumes of gallery museum space below, and that's kind of more octagonal view of that. That's another view of composition. We're looking back at the Chester French studio. And then just trying to dive into like how it's actually built, and it's a timber frame structure to kind of echo the original structure, but maybe using cross-laminated timber panels also to support it, and eventually just studying each one sort of function within the space differently according to its needs. So that's it.
Thank you. Well, I want to dive in and say it sounds like the residency has now overlapped with a pretty strong relationship with Chesterwood, or is it okay to assume that?
Too often. But as a proposal, it could just sort of exist there, as my dean of Grigori many years, John Haydick, said, if it's drawn, it's built. So that's, well, no, actually, he said, if it's drawn, it exists. Of course. Jumped ahead of it.
Does the Meadowlark studio still exist?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so does it have that same 30 by 30 structure?
You know what? I didn't dive into measuring it. I should, actually. I think it's a little bit smaller than the original, but it's also been added to. So there's a way to sort of excavate the original design, but this has a whole complex on it too. It's actually used mostly as a bedroom and living space. In fact, I knew a couple artists who stayed there and then worked in Morris Center in the main campus, and they were always talking about how much that walk is just amazing. Just go from Meadowlark to the Morris Center and back. Probably Bill is one of the artists that just constantly praises that. So it's still there. It's called Meadowlark.
We use it to house artists in residence. This year we have writers in residence down there, which has been great. We had someone for a few weeks in June, and at the end of it, I did an exit interview with him, and he's like, "I finished my book," I'm really struck by all the residencies we've had this summer. Just giving artists time and space, and things happen. It's just been so exciting to watch happen, and to have 3 artists with us this summer was incredible.
yeah, it was.
And I wanted to ask you three, because I try to leave you alone. But I'm so curious about what they're doing, but I'm like, don't go up there. I know some of you were there more than others. What, did you interact? Did you share what you were doing with each other?
Once a while, yeah. We talk, yeah.
And like, can you imagine if you were there by yourself, how different it would have been?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I learned a lot. Just
That's
watching
great.
Daiban's work evolve and looking at Kai's work and even borrowed a piece of clay from Kai.
And it's also different, so I was hoping you guys would have some conversations about what you're doing. That's great. Yeah, Grigori presented this to, we have a small arts residency committee that's trying to develop our residency program at Chesterwood. And we were very intrigued by your presentation. This is not something that was on anyone's radar. And now it's all we can talk about. It's like, wait a minute, what if because we renovated the residence at Chesterwood to be an artist residency center. But then when we moved in, it felt more like a hotel, and it felt very precious. And we're like, you guys got to cover the floors, nothing on the walls. You know, we like suddenly gave these three all these rules, and so your response is like, why don't we build some real studios where we can get messy? It's just sort of brilliant, and maybe the residence becomes just where artists sleep and eat.
Right. Yeah.
And then they have
can
these
walk
places,
down to
and
that
they
space.
walk down to the Meadowlark just the way French walked down to the Meadowlark to get away from everyone. It's just we're all super intrigued by this concept. Just think.
But there's actually being there is very. I mean, even though you can like spill paint. No, artists just all they want to do is spill some paint.
Throw paint.
But you know, there's something to that view. Like my room is just this tiny little room full of bookshelves that's empty, and the window, like Kyle showed, and you could just stare at the window. I mean, the amount of light change that takes place every few like minutes on that mountain, sometimes it's amazing. It's like, it was one of the first things I experienced there. I was spend the evening just watching the mountain go from dark blue because the sun was in front of it to blazing with reflected sunlight within like 10 minutes. So I was just like, I was painting, drawing, and I was like, oh, I guess that's it. And suddenly the thing just exploded in color. So it's, I mean, he had definitely a beautiful eye to pick that spot.
Yeah, the view is why French bought that property, but there was an old farmhouse there. And he saw that view, and he saw that studio, he saw that garden, and he tore down the old farmhouse and built the residence also geared towards that view.
After he did the studio, so the
After the
studio
studio.
was built first.
Yes.
After he moved the barn out of the way, and then he did the house almost like 10 years later.
No, but the studio is 1897, the house is 1901.
Okay, right.
So within a few
Okay.
years.
So Martin's house must have been built in a few years. I think it's like Martin's house was 1903, so
okay.
built about the same time as the residence.
Yeah, it just happens. Like, we talk about it, that we have to really watch out to not make a mess in that. We're using clay and try to use a plaster.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to keep it clean.
Yeah.
So wish could use a studio. This is gonna be, I think, if that happens, will be a great spot for the old artists, all kinds of artists.
In the final drawing, I'm going to draw a Daikon. Andromeda.
We'll have to have a test run of past residents.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah. We'll invite you all back.
Well, one idea actually I would like to run by you guys since you're all artists here. So the way I'm envisioning the studios, that it's not that each artist is going to get like a 30 by 30 box to work in it. Each studio would be dedicated to a specific technique, dirty, clean, and etc. So naturally separating them by amount of interaction they have with each other. And artists would have kind of their desks or spaces within those studios to work in or to work at. so that there's kind of more parallel play happening between the artists.
Like that.
And kind of more interaction to it, and also ability to like, if you get into the residency as a ceramic artist and you want to use some steel or glass, you just go over to another building. I was just at the Fine Arts Work Center at Provincetown, and they have that. It's not quite the same scenario because they mostly focus on printing, but each artist would just have given like a little table to essentially like a large table they can play at in common studios. It's kind of like, it felt very sort of communal, and yet watching the artists interact, and it was kind of very interesting to observe.
Well, stay tuned for that, please. And I'm going to come to, I want to share also the juxtaposition, because Stacy and Kara's spaces are wildly different than the pin drop at Chesterwood. Kara's in a room at the Red Lion, and Stacy as well. And all of these places are in varying stages of repair. And Ventfort, they're really just beginning their journey of restoration. And so they were like, do whatever you want, like jump on the furniture. I think they only have like 3 items that are original to Ventfort, which is very different than the Red Lion and Chesterwood. And so, I mean, you were given pretty much free reign. So I think that's a great way to conclude, is to say, like, because we're a little over time, thank you. And just thank you to all the artists and the sites. And I think the diversity in medium, in approach, is really inspiring. And I really appreciated everybody running with this new format of everyone together. I think we've all benefited, as you were saying, in the overlap, and I think that's all what we're rooting for these days. So thank you for coming. The openings are posted there, and we'd love to have you there, and come bring your friends to the shows at the various sites. I'm definitely curious to see how Chesterwood's going to be able to show and overlap these 3 artists. And thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Let's give the artists again a thank you. I know.